Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lynn Lee of christianlifecoaching.co.uk. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending upon where in the world you are. I know that we do have some very early risers here from Australia and New Zealand, and I'm really delighted that you've taken time to join me and honoured to be able to play a part in helping you to discover what God has put you on earth to do. It's an ache in so many people's hearts. They don't know and they want to know. They know there's something more. Well, I hope you know that you were created by God for a unique part that only you can play in his kingdom. There are things he's designed for you to do that I can't do and other people can't do. So in today's training, I'm going to be talking about how you can go about discovering your life purpose and exploring your God-given calling. And my objective during this time is just to help get you started, to get more clarity about your life calling and to start shaping what you know so far into a life purpose statement that summarizes what you already know about your purpose. And I think you'll be surprised how much you already know when you start thinking about it. So our time together today is going to consist of some telling, some showing, and some doing. I'm going to give you an overview and then I'll be sharing some practical steps. We'll be having a little interlude and then I'll be sharing some more practical steps, answering your questions and leaving you with a blessing. So make sure that you have paper and pen handy because you are going to want to take notes as we go. And that will make it so much easier when you get around to taking action. So put your phone on mute, turn off any social media distractions and focus. Give this your full attention because it's valuable. A little bit about me, for those of you who don't know me, not a lot. I love helping people to draw closer to God and become who they are in Christ. That is so important for me, and that's what I do. And part of my life purpose is to teach and equip and encourage and inspire people just like you. And the vehicle the Lord has given me to do that is coaching. And I've done a lot of mentoring, counseling, a lot of pastoral work over the years. And I honestly don't think that anything beats coaching when it comes to helping people get unstuck and become who the Lord called them to be. Now, since 2010, it's a long time now, I've been a coach trainer, and that's involved coming alongside counselors, leaders, people in the workplace, parents, couples, and equipping them to be more effective at bringing about the change that they long to see, both in their own life and the lives of the people that the Lord sends their way. Some of my students are on this call today. That really gladdens my heart. And I'd say that without exception, when they use coaching strategies with people, they get significantly better results. They really do. And that's because coaching really is a powerful catalyst for change. And that's why I'm so passionate about coaching people rather than giving them advice or telling them what to do. I really try very hard not to do that, even with my own grown-up children, because that's not very empowering. But you can't change what you're not aware of. To bring about the change you really want to see, it helps if you're crystal clear about your life purpose and your calling, if you know what God has in mind for you. So many people aren't. They spend their lives not quite hitting the mark, feeling vaguely dissatisfied, but not quite knowing why. And when people are struggling to move forward, it's often because what they're doing, however well they're doing it, it's not aligned with their calling. That's where the unease comes. And after all the busyness and the energy of getting to where they are, the energy starts to leak out, or they start asking bigger questions like, why am I here? And the three biggest things I coach people around are identity, mindset, and purpose. They're the things that come up most. Those three things, they're significant factors when it comes to understanding and acting on the dreams that God puts in your heart. So today, I'm going to introduce you to some simple principles. I am going to keep it simple that will help you to begin to discover your life purpose, or even reconnect you to it, so that you can walk in your destiny. Now, I'm bandying some words around here. So what do I mean when I talk about destiny? Well, some dictionaries define destiny as being the same as fate or a predetermined outcome. The Oxford Dictionary says the events that will necessarily happen to a particular person or thing in the future. Webster's 1812 dictionary says destiny is happily concealed from view. Well, I hope not, otherwise we're wasting our time today. And in other places, you see it described as a predetermined course of events, often held to be an irresistible power or agency. But we're not subject to fate, are we? God never intended us to be victims of circumstances as life happens around us. And I think this is much nearer the truth. Max Lucado said, "You weren't an accident. You weren't mass-produced. You aren't an assembly line product. You were deliberately planned, specifically gifted, and lovingly positioned on earth by the master craftsman." That really resonates with me. I don't know about you. And the purpose that the master craftsman had in mind when he created us, that's what we call destiny. It's his plan for our lives. And we each have a unique plan, good works that we were created to do. And I think we show that that we understand this to a measure when we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think I'm still answering that question, and I'm in my 60s. For most people, the answer to that question does actually change over time, because circumstances change, don't they? Things happen. You're exposed to different possibilities. You know things you didn't know before. New opportunities present themselves. You meet different people who open doors for you. I think the search for their destiny is a huge one for many people. And I think we've all wrestled with seemingly unanswerable questions such as, who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What's life all about? I used to ask those questions when I was a girl. I can remember asking those questions when I was 8. And it's something that never left me. I was on a big hunt to know the answers to those questions. Tony Stoltzfus defines destiny this way. He says, life purpose is the energy of passion channeled through experience and design in the service of a greater calling. Now, that's a bit profound. It needs unpacking. That's something to really chew over. So I'm just going to say it again. Life purpose is the energy of passion channeled through experience and design in the service of a greater calling. Now, if you look at that sentence, it includes God's design for your life, who you are, your life experience, what life has prepared you to do, and your passion, what you're passionate about. All the things that give you energy and motivate you to take action, and your calling, your commission from God to serve other people. Now, that is a very long answer to the question, what is destiny? And yet it still needs a bit more unpacking. People tend to use destiny and life purpose interchangeably. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between destiny and calling? I've used all of those words today. Life purpose and destiny, they're often used interchangeably, and that's probably what I'm going to do today. I have a habit of doing that, but I'm also going to be talking about calling. Now, the idea of having a calling always intrigued me. It seemed like such a powerful thing. It's something I always associated with missionaries who were called overseas. That's what it conjured up to me in my early days of being a Christian. And I think most people actually think about calling as a booming voice from God that tells you have to leave everything to go and do something that you might not actually want to do. Calling's often misunderstood. Now, I don't know about you, but I always used to think that calling was something that only happened to great men of God, but I don't think that anymore. I've come to believe that calling is an external commission you accept to serve a greater good. And that commission or call, it can come from God. It can come from your family, from a cause, from your nation, or from something else. Now, notice that that commission or call comes from outside. The call is to serve the greater good. It's for other people's benefit rather than self-serving. And that's the difference. The idea of calling is huge. Destiny includes calling. When you include the calling element, when you're discovering your destiny, it takes away any danger of being self-serving, because the focus is no longer exclusively about you and about what you want. And if you look at the way you're designed, who you are, your life experiences, what life's prepared you to do, what you're passionate about, what motivates you, what energizes you, but you leave out any idea of calling, I think you're defining your life purpose by looking internally, by focusing just on you. And that's what most life purpose discovery processes tend to do. They leave out the external component of calling. And I think that's a mistake. So why am I saying that? Because even if you have noble aspirations, and many people do, and you're selfless and you're altruistic, and you're motivated to consider other people, you're likely to come away from a life purpose discovery process saying, well, I'm equipped, I'm experienced, I'm passionate about it, my heart is to do it, but I wonder if I can actually do it, given the insecurities and the fears that I've picked up during my lifetime. Now, you might not say it quite like that, but I'm sure you can see where I'm coming from. And as we go through life, we accumulate baggage that often gets in the way. And it either limits us or it stops us altogether. Sometimes we're not even aware of limiting beliefs because they're often operating in our subconscious. We try things and they fail. We see other people try and fail, or other people tell us that we're not clever enough, or we're not outgoing enough, or that somebody else can do it better than us, or that we're not qualified for all sorts of reasons. And seeds of doubt get planted in our mind, and we entertain the thoughts long enough to wonder if they might be true. Maybe we're faithful to water and nurture those seeds of doubt so that they grow strong. And if we identify our destiny or life purpose just as a result of internal analysis, from our thoughts, from our feelings, from internal factors, there's nothing behind our conclusions that's stronger than how we perceive ourselves, how we see ourselves, what we think about ourselves. So when you add the idea of calling to the process of discovering your life purpose, you've got an element that's externally based. Your sense of purpose is no longer dependent on who you think you are or what you think you're not. Now, as a Christian, if our calling is from God to accomplish whatever purpose he's designed us for, given us experience for and passion for, then we have a call from God to accomplish it. And when he calls us, he equips us. And so we can be confident that we don't need to try to accomplish it in our own strength, because God's called us and he's going to be helping us every step of the way. So I hope you can see that by adding the calling element to identifying your life purpose, it makes a lot of difference. When we know that we're called, we're empowered by our call, because we absolutely know that the Lord equips those that he calls. And that's where faith comes in. Once you know that God has called you to something, faith starts to rise. And however impossible your call might seem in the natural, because it's God who equips and enables and empowers the people he calls, that it ignites your passion, it fuels it. And what looks impossible when you focus on the circumstances actually becomes possible, because God's in the midst. So without the element of calling, it's all you. It's your own ideas, and you can get caught up in good ideas rather than God ideas. I hope you've got that. You know, how many times have we done that? I know I have, and missed out on the best that God has for us. Now, when you have a call, you have an assignment. And as you take steps to line up how you live your life with your assignment, you can become unstoppable. And that's simply because you're called, and you know you're called. And because you know that God has said, you can do whatever it takes. So there's a being side and a doing side to everybody's destiny. And the doing is supposed to come naturally from being. So that's why being is really important. Now, somebody asked me this question earlier on in the Facebook group. I thought it was interesting, so I'm glad I included it here, because as Christians, we all have the same being component of destiny. Our life purpose is fundamentally to be like Jesus. You know, that's easier said than done, isn't it? But that's our goal as Christians, to become more and more like Jesus and to do the things that he does. Now, each one of us will do being like Jesus a bit differently, because we have different personalities, we have different life experiences. We're all equipped to be like Jesus in a unique way, with a unique flavor. And I think once you start to think of it that way, it's empowering. Life purpose without the element of calling, it's a bit self-centered. It doesn't pass the being test. You can't be self-centered and be Christ-like. You can't, can you? As a Christian, when you're identifying your life purpose, there'll be an element of serving a greater good, or serving other people, and loving God with all your heart and mind and soul, and loving your neighbors as yourself. The first two commandments, they're a powerful reminder, aren't they, that God created us to be one another centered. The Bible talks a lot about one another, and we're to be like Jesus. So I hope that that's brought things into focus and been helpful to you. I trust too that it's addressed the issue of calling and destiny, and that it's clear now that our overriding life purpose is to be other-centered as Jesus was. Now, we tend to use the word destiny, life purpose, and calling interchangeably. I do it all the time, and they're connected, but they have different components. Calling is from God. The other elements of discovering your destiny are internal. So, what tends to keep us from knowing our destiny or our life purpose or our calling? Sadly, most people don't seem to have much idea about what they were put on earth to do. And I'm sure that you've gathered from what I've shared so far that understanding and knowing your destiny is a process. Tony Stoltzfus calls it the calling journey. It's a journey, and often people don't really come into it until later in life, because it is a journey. And I think if there was an easy way to find out, I don't think we'd carry on wrestling with age-old questions like, who am I and what am I here for? We'd know, wouldn't we? But many people actually leave this earth with those questions largely unanswered. And it really doesn't have to be that way. You can know your God-given purpose, and you can live life fulfilled if you're willing to invest some time and press into God and hunt for some treasure. He wants us to search it out. And there are coaching tools that direct you to ask thought-provoking questions, introspective questions that help you to unearth your purpose. And these tools can lead to helpful answers. They do. But even though tools that help you to uncover your destiny and life purpose are easily available online, there are so many if you go and search, many people still don't know what their destiny is. So tools on their own clearly aren't the answer. You need more than that. And I think that's because the process of discovering your destiny, it requires a lot of awareness, and it takes time and it takes effort. We're in a culture that wants quick fixes, quick answers. And I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. Most people don't want to know things badly enough to search out the answers and to keep at it until they've found them. And I think it actually boils down to, how badly do you want to know? How important is it to you? How much? How much does it matter? Now, if you want God to order your steps, you need to be prepared to move your feet. I love that. It came from a business coach in New Zealand, a friend of mine. The process of discovering your purpose and calling actually requires some thoughtful reflection, and a lot of people are quite uncomfortable with that. You need to be prepared to spend some time asking God, waiting for his answers, and answering some insightful questions that cause you to dig deep, actually go below the surface. And reflecting and thinking about these things, it's important, and it's easier when you have some simple tools. And I think you'll also find that it helps to have somebody alongside, either somebody that you're doing it with so that you can bounce things off each other, somebody you can ask, because sometimes we're just too close to see, and we actually need somebody to help us to see what we're unlikely to see on our own, because we're very familiar with ourselves, aren't we? We don't stop and think. We take a lot of things for granted. And I think also it helps to have somebody to prod you along, help you to notice things that you're not seeing and challenge you. That can be uncomfortable, but it's worth the discomfort. And the times when I've invested in my future by working with a mentor or a coach, those have been the times when I've grown the most. So discovering your life purpose is a process that requires effort, time, thinking, reflection, and a willingness to invest in yourself. And I think given that, maybe it's not surprising that people generally don't know what their life purpose and their destiny are. People want to know, but they don't always want to know badly enough. People rarely set time aside to think about it. Their life's so busy that they don't find time to stop and think and consider. And it just comes back, doesn't it, to allowing yourself to be as well as do. And all the time-saving modern conveniences we have, they just don't seem to have helped us much with that. So many people are pressed for time. But if you're going to take hold of this, you need to be prepared to give it some time, to take some time to really think deeply and make an effort to invest yourself in the process. Equipping comes with a price. So why is knowing your destiny so important? Why am I laboring this? There are lots of reasons. I'm actually going to help you shortly. I've got some tools I'm going to share with you. But there are lots and lots of benefits that come to mind. When you have a strong sense of your destination and your purpose, it's actually easier to make major life decisions with confidence. Maybe you dread going to work because your job's just a job and you're bored, or you're stressed because you're being asked to do things that you're not wired for. I know people who've been driven to despair in difficult work situations, and it can be really hard. You might be made redundant and wonder what to do next, or be in a position where you can retire early, but you're not done yet, and you're wondering, what you're going to do with the rest of your life. When you know your life purpose, it's actually so much easier to decide, because the range of possibilities is significantly reduced. And that's because you already know which direction you're headed in. When you reach a fork in the road, you can more confidently choose the path that's leading in the right direction. And you don't need to stew over the decision or spend ages seeking the Lord about it, because you know it's the right thing to do, simply because you know your purpose and you have a clear destination in mind. So knowing your purpose actually eliminates those thoughts that something's missing from your life. When you feel like that, it's generally because there's some uncertainty, or you don't know enough about what God has in mind. And when you know what your purpose is, you're more certain, you have a better handle on things. There's nothing left to feed the thought that there's something missing, because when you're clear about your purpose, you can know for sure that with God's help, you're up to the task, because He's called you and He's preparing you. You might not be ready yet, but He's preparing you. Whatever happens, whatever the circumstances, you can actually go into each day knowing that your Father's partnering with you. You're able to do what your Heavenly Father's called you to do, because He's preparing the way. He's equipping you. He's enabling you. And there need be no anxiety or fear, because God's not going to lead you somewhere without providing you the resources you need, or showing you how, or sending somebody along to help you. There's never going to be anything that crosses your path that's beyond His strength in you. And that's the key, His strength in you. It enables you to press on in faith. Just imagine being able to go back over every aspect of your life and seeing that even when things weren't working out as you wanted them to, or as you intended them to, who's that familiar to, that from God's perspective, everything was on track. You were gaining experiences, you were learning lessons that were necessary for you to fulfill your destiny, that were shaping your character and your personality. And just think about Joseph's life. When he was in the pit, when he was falsely accused, when he was in a dungeon, the things that he was put in charge of that prepared him to help to save Israel. And Moses' experience in the desert, 40 years in the desert, getting ready, being prepared to go and be an instrument of delivery. The Bible clearly tells us that we can trust God to be working everything together for our good, even when it looks like disaster to us. Nothing need be wasted. We don't need to live with regrets. And I think knowing your life purpose increases your sense of peace and joy, because you begin to recognize God's hand in every aspect of your life. When I first went through this process, it became clear to me that I experiences I'd had before I was a Christian, I became a Christian when I was 19, were actually moving me along the path that God had planned for me towards my destiny. So if you come to God later in life, it doesn't mean that it was all wasted. God can use it. And knowing your purpose helps you choose a meaningful career or meaningful work that you find rewarding. A lot of people either hate their job or find it very unfulfilling. People often leave one job that they're feeling unfulfilled in and walk straight into another job that's just as bad or even worse. Imagine having a clear idea of your destiny. Once you've got a clear picture, you've got a whole new set of criteria with which to evaluate a new job opening or embark on a career or start a business, which might even be the means of fulfilling your destiny. Knowing your purpose gives you the confidence and the courage to say no to things that will take you off course or off purpose. It's so much easier to say no when you know it's actually not God's part of your, I can't get that out, but it's not part of God's plan. There you go. How many times have you been asked to do things and made to feel guilty when you dared to say no? I think that's manipulation. When you're clear about your life purpose, it's so much easier to turn down opportunities and wonderful offers, sometimes wonderful offers that would simply wear you out or take you off course. And it gives you freedom to focus your time and energy on what's important to both you and God. Knowing your purpose, it releases you as well from comparing yourself with other people who have a different focus and purpose for their life. You're not supposed to be like them. And that can be such a drain. Just because somebody you admire is doing something, that doesn't mean to say you need to be doing it too, or that you need to be doing it in the same way. Maybe it's not your shape. Maybe it's not what God has called you to do. And it can be so releasing to know that you don't need to do it. Instead, you can run with what God has designed you to do. So, where does long-term goal setting fit with life purpose? I'm adding this here because I think it's important. Some people just create long-term plans, and that's not quite it. That's part of it. Life purpose is the big picture. And as we've said already, it's more a state of being than doing. And an effective life purpose statement, it's not prescriptive. It gives you freedom to accomplish your purpose in different ways. Goals are specific. They're measurable. They're attainable. They usually have a time element to them. They're the vehicle. They're the vehicle that you choose to take you there. Life purpose is an overall target. It's the destiny you have in God. Goals are the specific steps that enable you to fulfill your purpose. So setting detailed long-term goals is actually an important part of the process. The goals are the steps that help you to arrive at the destination, but they must never become a means in themselves. It's very easy to lose sight of the big picture, and you really need to keep the big picture in front of you. Okay, now for the really practical bit. I'm going to share some practical steps to help you discover how to get closer to identifying your destiny and discover your life purpose. Now, obviously, there isn't time to go through the whole process in detail, but I'm going to give you an overview of 4 steps that will help you to make a really good start. So a good place to start is with a list that relates to how God designed you. So start making a list. You're going to need lots of paper for this. Start to make a list of your personality type. of your character traits, your gifts, your strengths, your natural talents. I'm talking about a big, long list, but everything you can think of, a bit of a brain dump. If you don't like lists, then you could do it like a big mind map. Most people never take time to write a list like that. And if you've not given it much thought, you might not have all the answers readily at your fingertips. You might find it helpful to take some assessments to help you identify some of the answers. And you will find some free versions of tests like that online. There's a free Myers-Briggs test. I'll send you a link with the replay. There's a free DISC test online, Strength Finders. There are all sorts of things out there, free versions of tests that will give you some clues and help you to identify how you're wired. To identify your life purpose, you are going to need to take time to find out about you. This actually is about you. Look at things like your family background. If you have siblings, where are you in the family order? What's your place of birth? You know, where were you born? Where on earth were you born? What country? What town? What your socio-economic status? What about your siblings? How have they affected you? You know, things that you probably would classify as things or circumstances beyond your control. Obviously, you didn't get to choose where you were born, did you? Or who your parents were going to be, or where you were going to be on the ladder. Those are circumstances beyond your control. Now, the better you know yourself, and the more you give yourself to this process, the easier this process becomes. So take some time doing this. Don't rush it. It's not something you can do in 5 minutes. If you've done it in 5 minutes, you have not dug deep enough. You actually might find that it helps to ask a trusted friend what they see. Somebody who knows you well and has your best interests at heart and isn't just going to say what they think you want to hear. You're not going to get much information if you ask somebody who just wants to be nice. You need to ask somebody who will love you enough to tell you the truth. And there'll be a lot of things that will be the result of circumstances outside of your control. And they all contribute to make you who you are. They've shaped you in some way. They've shaped some of your attitudes. And if you have somebody alongside who's nudging you and reminding you, that can be a really big help. Now, the second step is to list skills that are the result of how you were nurtured or brought up, skills that you've picked up along the way, experiences that shaped you, your character, your ethics, your values, work experiences, skills you've acquired along the way. I have acquired so many skills along the way. I've worked in so many different jobs and different aspects of things online that I sometimes look and it's easy for me to get drawn off in another direction just because I can do something and do it well. And that's why, for me, it's been really important to know what my purpose is and what my calling is, because then it's much easier to say no to something, even if it looks really good. So include in your list some things like where you grew up, you know, and what were some of your mountaintop experiences, some of your greatest successes. Where did you work? What kind of jobs have you had? And what kind of unique skills have you developed as part of your various jobs? What do you consider yourself to be really good at? And what things have other people complimented you about? What values are most important to you? And what are your interests? What are your hobbies? What do you do when you have free time? You know, when you can actually choose what to do. There'll be some clues in that. And what are your unique gifts? And what do you love doing? What do you really enjoy. So take some time to get to know yourself and how you're wired, and take time to really dig into these things. Now, this second step is more about acquired skills and interests rather than those in the first step, which are more in how you were designed and feature more of the innate talents and skills and gifts. I hope you can see the difference, but you don't need to get hung up on which categories these things fall into. It doesn't really matter, because the questions are simply designed to help you become more familiar with yourself, that they're a means of getting to know you. Now, most people can't actually see things that other people readily see. So you might find it helpful to find 2 or 3 people who you really trust, who know you well, willing to be honest, tell you what they see, and be prepared for some surprises. When I did that, I had people tell me things that they thought were very special about me, and I hadn't even got them on my list. And the reason they weren't on my list is simply that I was so familiar with them. They were just who I was as far as I was concerned, but to them, it was a really big thing. And actually, when I looked at it through their eyes, I could see that it was a very valuable thing too. So, and if you're feeling really, really brave, you might even share them, actually show them your list, and because that might spark some other things for them. Somebody might think that you have a skill for really getting to the heart of a matter, but to you, that might just be you being friendly and having a chat about things and bringing your insights. You might not even think that that's a special gift, but it is. Somebody who can get to the heart of the matter brings something very valuable. So getting insight and feedback is going to help you to become more aware. Think about where you acquired the skills and what's going on that gives you those things. So if you have particular character traits, what led to that? How did you end up being that particular way? And a third step would be to start listing things or people groups or concepts or causes that you're really passionate about, make you come alive. Things like orphans, older adults, the homeless, the abused, persecuted Christians, unreached people groups, animal welfare, the environment, spiritual growth. Maybe there's just one thing, maybe there are 2 or 3. So once you've identified what you think they are, just think about the reasons why you're passionate about them. What made you list those things? What is it about them that stirs you? And have you had first-hand experience? And if you have, how much? What kind? Just note it all down. This isn't the time to start evaluating. You can do that later. Just get it all down there. And then there's the question of calling. And that's the aspect that, as I said, that most life purpose discovery processes actually leave out. Once you've gathered all that information, you can start to look at it from an aerial view, from God's perspective. And if you were asked to make a recommendation on the basis of the information that you have already, or that you have as a result of just going through those few exercises, if you were asked to identify your life purpose, what would seem to make sense for somebody who's wired the way you are and who has your particular group of experiences? What fits the data? You've been collecting lots of data. What fits the data? Don't just think about that yourself. Spend some time asking God about it and give him an opportunity to speak in. And then you could start to write a couple of short sentences that complete the phrase, "The purpose of my life is." and fill in the blank. I use journaling exercises to help bring thoughts about calling to the surface. I find that helpful. I use journaling to help me to connect with God's thoughts about me and to discover my own calling and to find out all sorts of things when I really need to know what God thinks. It's really a matter of focusing on Jesus, asking him a question, and then writing down whatever comes to mind, writing in faith, believing that the thoughts that come as you focus on Jesus are him answering your question. Now, I know I've given you a lot of information. There's a lot to think about. You can listen to the replay if you want to take some detailed notes. There's more to come. What I've been describing really is simply creating a personal inventory. That's what I'm asking you to do. A personal inventory of internal factors and external ones. And if you do what I have just been describing, you will start to discover some keys and identify things that maybe you haven't been very aware of until now. Or maybe they've been a bit fuzzy, they haven't been in focus, you've not been able to put them all together. But they start to come into sharp focus as you explore and as you ponder with God. We're often told that it's wrong to spend time thinking about yourself, so we shy away from doing it. Some people think introspection is selfish and we need to always be focused on other people. But what I'm talking about today isn't selfish. It's actually part of communing with God and allowing Holy Spirit to speak to you and teach you and direct your paths. And I think at this point, it might be helpful to have an example of a personal statement. This is the statement I crafted around 10 years ago. It's a bit wordy and I have updated it. I'm just wanting to give you an example. So the purpose of my life is to be a source of training, equipping, wisdom and encouragement so that fellow Christians might become who they are in Christ and identify and wholeheartedly pursue what God has called them to be and do. Now that is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? The updated version is much more succinct. I'll share that with you in a minute. But knowing that gave me courage to invest in myself and launch out and create a business that's a vehicle that allows me to do those things that God has put on my heart to do. The updated version does have elements of that, but even though it's shorter, it's bigger. It's a broader brushstroke. It includes things I actually wasn't aware of when I wrote that particular statement 10 years ago. So I revisited my life purpose statement 5 years ago, and I've done it again recently. It looks different again, but I'm not sharing that one with you today. So this is what it looked like 5 years ago. With God's help, I refined that really wordy statement to a simple, don't know how we've got that, to a simple sentence that's easier to remember. The purpose of my life is to coach, encourage, inspire, and empower millions to become who they are in Christ and fulfill their destiny. I did hesitate to put that up there today because it does sound a bit much, doesn't it? Millions. It sounds like a tall order, and I really did hesitate to put the word millions in there when I wrote it. But I know that if that's really what the Lord has in mind, he'll make it possible. When I cooperate with him and dare to step out in faith, we've got a really big God. Most of us think way too small. And that's why we need to include God in this process, because otherwise it won't be big enough and it won't be the whole thing. When I wrote that, I didn't know that I'd be doing webinars with people whose books I'd read and conferences I'd attended, or that I'd traveled to the United States to take part in events and speak, or that I'd write and publish a book, or I'd be doing many of the things I'm doing now in the way that I'm doing them. what difference will knowing your destiny make in your life? What's the impact? I'll come at that from a personal perspective. Sometimes my destiny seems huge and I look in amazement. When I read it at the end of last year, I was gulping. I was thinking, this is massive. God, without you, I can't do this. And I do look in amazement sometimes and wonder, God, is this really how you see me? And there are disappointments, and sometimes circumstances do suggest otherwise. And there are times when you think, oh, it's just too big. It's just me. It's just me. But it's not. It's not just me. It's me and God. It's not just you. It's you and God. If I didn't have a clear knowledge of my purpose and God's calling, if I wasn't convinced that it's true, I probably have given in and stopped at some of the hurdles, because there've been a lot of them, and some of them have been big. But knowing my calling has greatly increased my perseverance. Some would call it stubbornness, to stick at things and find ways past the hurdles. I can be really determined once I get going. Knowing your purpose helps you to make better decisions about what to do with your time, and it helps you to find courage when circumstances seem to suggest otherwise. It helps you to step out in faith and focus. It is so much easier to know what to say yes to, what to say no to. It eliminates a lot of stress because it makes decision-making easier. And I've become really clear about what I'll do and what I won't do. And I know that some people have been rather surprised because they used to be being a little more amenable. But being clear about your purpose means that you end up doing things that delight your heart much more often. And as you do that, you're delighting God's heart and you're benefiting the people God called you to serve, the people around you. You really are. They're getting a better slice of you. It's not selfish because the people around you end up getting the very best part of you. I love what I do, and it comes out in the way that I relate to people. Now, I casually mentioned journaling earlier. So for those of you who don't journal and haven't really given it much thought, I'm just going to explain what I mean when I say journaling and how I think it fits with your purpose. I'm just going to say a bit more about that. When I speak about journaling, I'm talking about Jesus and asking him questions. Really, that's what it is. I'm talking about asking Holy Spirit to be your teacher. So asking Jesus questions, expecting him to answer you, and writing down those answers. So instead of just dialoguing with yourself, having a little conversation with yourself or with a coach to attempt to answer all those reflective questions I've given you today, you can have a conversation with Jesus. Ask Jesus to just show you what your gifts and talents are, and expect him to tell you, and write down what comes to your mind when you've asked that question. Now you can discover your purpose without journaling. The reason I like to journal is that it's an effective way of slowing down, getting in touch with your thoughts and your feelings, your emotions, your beliefs, and it's a way of enabling you to more easily hear God's voice. So many people really struggle to hear God, and that's why I wrote a coaching guide. Journaling tends to take the struggle out of that. It did for me. It helped me to begin to hear God a lot more often, a lot more clearly. Now, different people, they journal in different ways. I have a friend who's made a daily habit of journaling. For him, morning works best. That's what he does. I tend to do mine in the evening. He goes to his study, which is a quiet place. Sometimes he puts worship music on, and he starts by praying, thanking God for all the blessings in his life. And he's developed a habit of gratitude, which is a good thing to have. And then he might write a question in his journal about what's been going on. And then he'll focus on Jesus. He has a picture of Jesus in his mind, and he asks, what do you have to say to me today about this? What do you want me to know today, Jesus? And I think it's important to focus on Jesus rather than the problem or the question, because the Lord knows, doesn't he? And then when you write down whatever comes to mind, you're going to find yourself writing down some amazing things. I know I do, and other people do too, things that totally surprise me. Now, when it's something significant that could be life-changing, I recommend sharing what you've written with somebody you trust who hears God and looking for confirmation. When you're starting out with journaling, if you're not focusing on Jesus, if you're focusing on what you want, you could end up with a bunch of thoughts that are mostly your own thoughts and not Jesus at all. So that's why I'm just putting that caution in there. I genuinely think that journaling enhances the discovery process, but you don't have to be able to journal to discover your life purpose. For some people, it's a really important part of the process. It's something they do naturally. It's a tool they use to help them to hear God more clearly. But there are other people who hear God in very different ways and yet hear him clearly. So please do not let anything I've said about journaling stand in your way. It's not a must, it's a tool. If journaling was required to discover your destiny, God would have wired everybody that way. I really love the way that God uses your own preferred method of communication to help you commune with him. Just because somebody hears God in a certain way, that it doesn't mean to say that's how you have to hear him, or that you're not as spiritual as they are if you don't. I hope that helps somebody today. God does not reduce things to a formula. He wants us to be dependent on Holy Spirit. Now, God is not trying to hide your destiny or your life purpose from you. It might seem like it sometimes, but he's not. He wants you to pursue him, and he wants you to dig as if you're digging for treasure. And you are. If you apply yourself to this, you will find treasure. So I hope you're finding this helpful and you're beginning to see the importance of discovering your life purpose and your calling, and even how you can actually start to go about doing it. I've got a few more things to share, but first I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about a life purpose discovery coaching program that I've developed, and a really special offer I want to make to everybody who's here today and listens to the replay. And once I've done that, I'll give you some more useful tips for implementing your life purpose statement that you can put into action straight away. I think you'll find them very helpful. I'll also answer your questions. So if you have questions, if you would save them till towards the end and put them in the chat box, then I'll be able to find them more easily. But I am here. I'm very happy to spend time answering questions later. So don't hesitate if you have questions. So what's the next step, or what am I hoping is going to be the next step for you? I'm actually gathering a group of people who want to know what they were put on earth to do and are prepared to spend some time digging for treasure. I want us to go on a treasure hunt together. Over the course of 6 weeks, we'll go through the steps I outlined earlier in detail, and we'll use some more coaching exercises as well. And as long as you focus and you do those coaching exercises, you can expect to end up with a clear, inspiring life purpose statement and be clear about your destiny and your call. It will be like a roadmap for your life. That's how good it will be. And I'll provide coaching tools and exercises to help you identify your calling. I'll answer your questions. I'll guide you through the process. I'll help to keep you on track. We'll be doing that live on Zoom. We'll all be able to see each other on camera and hear one another. So it will be very interactive. You'll learn how to dig deep. You'll learn how to evaluate what you find out, so that you can recognize what you're put on earth to do and craft a compelling life purpose statement that will be like a blueprint. There'll be some bonus content. I'm going to include some stuff on how to hear God for you, because I think that will be really, really helpful. It includes everything you need. And of course, you won't be doing it alone. You'll have the option of connecting with other people in a private members group, and there'll always be somewhere to go for some support, encouragement, and to get feedback. Feedback can be very helpful. So what do you think would be a fair price? Well, I promise you it's not nearly as much as you think. I'm keeping the price low because I want to make this program easily available to the people who need it and enable them to get on track, stay on track, so they can live life blessed. So if I were going to go through this process with you personally, it would cost you a lot of money, because it takes a lot of coaching sessions. So it would actually be very expensive, but I don't want that to stand in the way. So I've actually priced this group coaching at £75 or $97. That is a single payment. It's not lots of payments. It's just one payment for those 6 sessions. And there are only 30 places available. And the reason I've kept it to 30 is I want us to be able to, I want it to be interactive. I want us to be able to really dig into this together. Now, the last time I offered it like that, it sold out. We ended up with a waiting list. So if this is something you want to do, just go and do it. It's not a class. It's 6 interactive coaching sessions. So that's why I want to keep the numbers low. There you go. I hope that you'll plan to join me. Today's training has been about finding your calling and destiny, and the benefits of knowing your purpose. But finding your purpose is really just part of the story. Once you know what your purpose is, you're responsible to actually take some steps towards doing something about it. And that's going to require some significant changes in your life. And change is not always fun, is it? It can be a joy when you approach it in the right way, though. And change is always easier not to do than to do. The keys to successful change are structure and accountability. And that's one of the reasons why being part of a group is so helpful. I know that some of you are more than ready to make changes so you can begin to walk in your destiny. And I know that some of you might prefer to settle for where you are when you consider the cost of making the effort. And without the accountability that coaching brings, even well-intentioned, really motivated people will fall by the wayside. It's hard to keep going on your own. But if coaching is beyond your budget right now, what I recommend is having a good friend who's on the same journey, doing it together. You're much more likely to complete the process and be successful when you have somebody who's holding you accountable, spurring you on, encouraging you when the going gets tough, like it does sometimes. And it's so much easier to get things started and complete them when you're walking with somebody who's holding your hand. So now for the next bit, I'm going to give you some quick tips about implementing your life purpose statement. But before I do that, I want to answer a question that often crops up, because I think this is likely to be something that a number of you will find. What do you do if you have a passion for lots of different areas and you've got lots of skills that make it hard to narrow it down to a simple life purpose statement? Now, that's a really good question. We are all incredibly gifted. We have an amazing array of gifts and talents, though most of us spend time discounting our gifts and admiring the gifts of other people. We play down what we're gifted to do. If you're passionate about lots of different things and you have a lot of skills, what you're going to find is that when you go through the life purpose discovery process, there's a synergistic combination of passions and skills. And as you reflect on the different components, and as you work through the discovery process we've been talking about, you're going to find that it's not as hard as you think to come up with a one-sentence life purpose statement. Some things will overlap. So be thinking about where these things overlap, because there will be places. And I think as you do that, it will become obvious that some things will start to stand up, rise to the top. And you'll find that when you give yourself to the process, you'll be able to come up with a statement that identifies in broad brush terms what it is that really excites you and you're capable of doing and have the experience to do. The process actually gives you an opportunity to find what suits you best. Just because you're really good at something and have a skill, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're supposed to focus on. That's why you need to do this with God. What we want is for you to come up with something that really feels like you. It suits you best. It fits with your calling. And so if you have a bunch of things written down, a good question would be to ask, how do all these things line up? What do they line up around? Because there will be some common things. What do they line up around? And what rises to the top? And the other thing I would recommend you do is that you ask God to shine his light on things for you. I hope that helped. So here are some tips for creating your own life purpose statement and putting it into action. First, I recommend you don't do what I did with my first one and make it really wordy. I recommend you make it short enough to memorize, so you can actually carry it around with you, and you don't even need to carry it around with you, because it's easy to remember. It's easy to say. It just trips off your tongue. You don't even have to think about it. You know what it is. And the other thing is to make it unique. In other words, write it in a way that brings a smile to your face. In fact, the way I wrote mine at the end of last year brought tears to my eyes. That's how much it engaged with who I really am. Write it in a way that brings a smile to your face when you read it, because it's really what you're about. It thrills your heart to think that this is what you were born to do. It embodies who you are. And the other thing I would say to you is, let your first attempt be a draft. You'll probably have lots of drafts along the way that you can modify as God reveals more things to you. So revisit it, because you will find that it changes over time. A lot of the essence will probably be there, but what I find most people do at the beginning is that they're just down to the specifics. A lot of their life purpose statements, I see that they're the vehicle. It's all about the vehicle rather than the broad brushstroke, the essence of what it is that they're called to do. But use your statement as a filter or a lens through which you examine other areas of your life. There you go. Look at every area of your life and see how your life is lining up with your life purpose, because you'll find that some areas do and some don't. And if it's not really lining up with your life purpose very well, then be thinking about what changes you can start to make. Some things just might need to go so that you can make room for your purpose. There's a thought, isn't there? So really do look at every area of your life and ask these questions. How can I outwork that powerfully in this particular area of my life? So when I'm talking about different areas of your life, I'm talking about your spiritual life, your family, work, health, just different aspects of your life. How can I outwork that powerfully in this particular area of my life? Because you might need to make some adjustments in different areas. What changes am I willing to make in my life that better reflect my life purpose, that will make room for it, you probably are going to need to make some changes, and you might need to change some priorities and rethink how you spend the bulk of your time. Maybe you push some things off your plate because they're clearly getting in the way of fulfilling your purpose. They're a hindrance, they're a distraction. And the other thing I think you'll find helpful is to explain some of these changes to the significant people in your life, because if you don't, they're going to wonder what's going on. Explain your reasons for making big changes. That will reinforce your decision as well. And I think your confidence will grow as you speak life into your newly discovered life purpose. And then once you've discovered your life purpose, it's going to lead to some changes. It really is. So you're going to need to be courageous. You might need to think about who's speaking into your life and where they fit or where they no longer fit. Some people are in our life for a season, and we often hold on when we need to let go. I think somebody needed to hear that today. There have been times when I have been really sad about that. Some people do come into our life for a season. They don't always stay. They're not always supposed to. Some of those people, they just might remain friends, but not feature in your life as much as they used to. And it's almost as though the relationship dials down. It was a great source of pain to me until I realized it was all part of God's plan. And I needed to learn to be more open-handed with my relationships. That was not easy to do, but with God's help. And that's where we need to be going all the time, to God. We need his help to do these things. We have almost finished, but not quite, because we're going to get to your questions, and I want to leave you with a blessing. What have you learned today that's been valuable to you? So this is when it would be really good if you started typing in the chat. What was the best part, or what stood out to you? What helped you most out of what I said? And then in the midst of all that, if you would add some questions too, that would be wonderful. I'm going to give you time to just type some things in there while I go on and answer a question that was asked earlier. If you just hover at the bottom and click where it says chat, it will bring up a chat window, and then you should be able to speak to me. So if you could type your comment or your question in the chat, that would be really helpful to me. Oh, I'm loving some of these comments. Let go and let God. I'm not alone. It's been a real confirmation of what God has been saying recently. Thank you. And it does my heart good to know that. Let me just answer the question that came up earlier while you're putting your feedback in there and your questions. How do you know whether the desires of your heart are what God desires for you? Have you ever wondered? Does God always give you the desires of your heart? That's not an easy question to answer, really. I've wanted lots of things over the years. When I started journaling and I really started to spend a lot more time with God, I got more in touch with what I really desired and what was important to me. And some of the things that were important to me over many years, they're not important any longer. The true desires of my heart have emerged as I've become more clear about my life purpose. And I think as you get more in tune with God, some desires fade because your desires start to line up with God's. And as our desires line up with what God wants for us, then we do find that he gives us the desires of our heart more and more. I don't think he gives us everything we want. I think we'd all say, no, God doesn't give me everything I want. And the truth is, everything we want isn't necessarily good for us. If the things we want are affect somebody else. He's not going to override people's free will. If the things that we want are going to take us away from the destiny he has planned for us, he's probably not going to give us that particular desire. So, no, all our desires are not necessarily from God, and that's why we need to develop a closer walk with God so that we can come to understand what is going to keep us with God and on track with God, and what's likely to take us away. Sometimes God saying no is a really, really good thing. I'm just looking at the chat. Amanda said it's confirmed some of what I felt God's been showing me about things I need to let go of to follow my calling. It is a brave thing, and I'm glad it's helped you to see that, because it isn't always easy, is it? Sherry said, ask God what he thinks my purpose is. And then she said, stranger, I've not actually done this. It's interesting, isn't it? We go through life without asking God questions. This is one of the things we do on the coach training. I think in one of the preliminary webinars, I talked about asking God questions. And it's really amazing. Once you start to do that and you actually expect him to give you answers, you start finding out all sorts of things. I think he wants us to. When Jesus left the earth, he left Holy Spirit as our guide and to be our teacher. Paul went into the desert for, 14 years and was taught by the Holy Spirit. I think lots of questions were being answered in that situation. So it's a good thing to do. Details about what to pray about. I've actually stopped just praying. That might sound a bit weird, but what I do is I will actually spend some time worshiping God and praising. I usually use the Lord's Prayer as a kind of pattern for prayer in the day. And then other than that, I will stop and I will have a conversation with God before I pray about stuff and say, what's your heart on this? What do you want me to speak into? What do you want me to pray about? And it's become much more that kind of a relationship. And I think I'm a lot better for it. And I think so are a lot of situations that I'm involved in. Marie, I'm really delighted about that. She says, I realize the past 2 years have not been wasted. Holy Spirit's been speaking to me and walking with me. He led me to your ministry. That's lovely, Marie. And I hope it continues to be a blessing. We're going to have lots more free webinars like this. Cassie says, when you found your life purpose, was it like a light bulb moment? Did you have an internal feeling that's what it was? There are some elements of my life purpose that I think they've always been there. When I was a child, I used to play at school. I read a lot. I was a natural teacher. I actually developed a really bad stutter at the age of 7 and the age of 12, and it took me a while to recover from. But in spite of that, I was actually elected as the spokesperson at school. I was put on the school council because people could rely on me to speak up. So I've always stood up for the underdog. I've always been willing to speak out, even when it's been uncomfortable. That's the kind of thing I have done, and I've done naturally. And that's actually part of what I do now. When it came to some of the finer elements, some of the bigger elements, the scary elements, Cassie, it was definitely a light bulb moment. And when I went through the Dreamfire experience before Christmas, which is a slightly longer, more in-depth version of what I'm offering in the Life Purpose Coaching Program, I really did dig deep, and I was listening to God, and that's why I was crying, actually, because it touched something deep inside me. And I absolutely knew that it was, my whole heart was in it. I had finally broken through and got to that place where, this is it. This is really what God has in mind. So it was like a light bulb moment. It really was. For some people, it will be quieter. There won't be tears. There might be other things instead. But I hope that answers your question. Sherry says, I've been waiting for God to tell me what I should do. Do you know a lot of people do that? Over the years, I've come to think that actually there's an active part of waiting. There's an active part to waiting, so that we're waiting for God to just tell us. And sometimes he does. Sometimes he'll give us a dream, or somebody will have a prophetic word and it wakes us up. Sometimes actually he's waiting for us. He's waiting for us to press in and ask and go and find out. And so that's something I would really encourage you to do. Becky says, thanks so much. Helpful information. It's a confirmation to keep dreaming big with me and God. We never know what may be possible. A reminder not to let my circumstances get between what God's leading me to. I'm looking forward to spending more time asking Jesus about these things, as you suggested. So help me to see I need to ask God better questions. It's a deeper relationship. Do you know, it really is. And once you're in there and that relationship deepens, you'll never want to go away from it being like that, because it's really, really special. So it looks like we haven't actually got any more questions. So what I'd like to do is, if something else comes up, I'll get to it at the end. But I just want to thank you for spending time with me today, and I hope that you're really, really encouraged to discover your life purpose and walk in your calling. There is actually on the screen, there's a little link there, although you can't click that. It's not a clickable link. So I'm just going to put a link in the chat if you want to go and have a look. I have kept the price deliberately low because I want people to be able to come and do this. So go and have a look. I would be delighted to have you join me in this process. I want to encourage you not to sit on the fence, but to make a decision one way or the other. Indecision robs you. It's a thief. It's not a good place to be. So whatever it is, whether it's about this program, whether it's about pursuing your life purpose in some other way, make a decision and go ahead and do it. Just do it. In closing, I'd like to share a quote from Marianne Williamson that captures the leap of faith that you're taking. You're either in the process of taking or you're planning to take. She says, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that's within us. Isn't that powerful? It's not just in some of us. It's in every single one of us. Every single one of us. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I was going to leave you with a blessing, but I can see there's more stuff in the chat. So let me just, a few interesting, I will take some time to do this. If you need to go, that's okay. But I am going to take some time to do this. Any tips on how to handle things when somebody wants you to be their close friend, when you know they don't belong in that role and would take you off your life purpose if you let them? That's an interesting one, isn't it? I have people like that in my life, and I have learned to be boundaried about that. I know somebody else who's in that exact same position now, and it's about limiting your time with them. If you're not sensing that's what you're supposed to be doing, you're not doing them any favors by helping them to believe that that's the position that they have in your life. So I'd be asking God for wisdom to know what boundaries to put in place, and not always be available when they want to see you. So you need to train them not to be dependent on you. So off the top of my head, that's what I would say, but you need to ask God about that. And Kim said, what if we move around, don't really have people that close to us to confirm things that we're good at? Some part of the gifts test asks what others say we're good at. And I seriously don't have relationships like that. I'm an introvert and I don't go out a lot. I like to teach, but have never had that opportunity. Isn't that interesting? I know you probably don't believe it because here I am, but I am actually an introvert. Honestly, I do not like public speaking when it comes to being on a stage. If I go to a party, I don't really want to be there. I will just go and find one person and talk to them. I like my own company. I can spend hours and hours alone. I'm energized by alone time. If you're in a situation like that, you don't have to ask them face to face. There will be some people who have known you for long enough. And you can do it by email. You can do it by text. And if you really don't have anybody who can speak in like that at all, it's going to need to be you and God. You won't have that extra element. But there will be somebody out there who knows you well enough to speak in. I can almost guarantee that. Let me leave you with a blessing, then I'm going to let you go. And I really do hope that you decide to come and join me in this coaching program. I've not done it for 6 years, not live. I've just been selling the recorded version. So this is a new thing for me. I bless you with knowing what your Father wants you to do. I bless you with knowing in your spirit what your Father has called you to do, with such a clear knowledge that no one can dissuade you from what the Lord has called you to do. I bless you with a clear sense of God's call on your life, both the big picture and a daily sense of what the Lord has for you. I bless you with the peace of being at the right place at the right time, with the peace of not being overwhelmed. I bless you with the assurance that nothing will cross your path that is beyond His strength in you. I bless you with the peace of knowing that your Father will partner with you to provide everything you need every day, whatever befalls. Be blessed. You know, I do these free training calls because I know that there are lots of people who can't invest even in low price programs. So if you have friends who you know will benefit from what we've shared today, I encourage you to send them a link to the replay. I'll be sending that out tomorrow so that they can listen in and they can be helped and inspired and encouraged as you have been today. Thank you so much for choosing to join me and staying to the end. If you have questions about the coaching program, please feel free to email me and I will see you around on social media.